Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. We're glad you're here. It is the last Friday in June, Friday, June 25th, episode 63. Today, we're going to talk at least once more about the COVID news, and that's leading up to some very important events for us in the month of July. After that, we'll talk about those July things, and then we'll talk about the pitches. Today is the day we are judging the pitch party and awarding $2,500 at the end of the show through our hat tip process. And after that, we'll have time for Q&A, quick check-ins, whatever's on your mind. So with that, let's touch COVID Connect at least one more time. The data coming from covid.cdc.gov. And as you know, it's been great news, but I'm going to take you back about 10 weeks. Here's what Michigan, as opposed to the rest of the country, looked like about 10 weeks ago. The cases were exploding. More specifically, the community transmission was exploding. And this was ongoing for a number of months, especially but not exclusively in the state of Michigan. If we look at that today, it's a very different story. The community transmission has died down, and this in sync with the cases coming down. And that translates to something was wonderful news, lowest number of daily cases in basically forever. So wonderful, wonderful news. But it leaves us with this enduring question. Why was the community transmission so high? Did that play a role in the eventual drop-off that we saw, et cetera, et cetera? What have we actually been seeing? And if you remember some months ago, we had Dr. Philip Levy from Wayne State University on the show, frontline to the whole thing over the last year and a half. He's coming back next week, July 2nd. He's going to be with us. And if there's one thing about Dr. Levy, he has always been equal opportunity in his truth-telling, and it makes many of us comfortable on one side or uncomfortable on another, and I've always really appreciated that about him. So Dr. Levy's going to be back with us next week answering, what about this community spread thing that we've seen for the last 3 months, and really what has been going on? How should we be thinking about this? We want to get back to some of the science, now retrospective. Now we can look at it in retrospect and see what's been going on. Dr. Philip Levy joins us next week to talk about that. We'll leave the COVID news right there to make space for our pitch party, but one more announcement for July. In partnership with MedHealth, we are going to have 2 special MedTech Crossroads episodes that they are helping to put together. July 16th, COVID vaccines, boosters, and variants. We're going to have a panel of healthcare experts. And on July 23rd, the Detroit-Windsor border. Should it reopen? When? How? What's the right thing? The 2 countries are dealing with where we are right now very differently. We're going to talk about that because there's a huge amount of trade that happens over the Detroit-Windsor border. You may or may not be aware of it. But it makes a big difference to Detroit and to Windsor, and we're going to talk about when should that reopen and what are the parameters around it. So with that, those are some of our plans for July. Next up, it is finally the $2,500 quarterly MedTech Crossroads Pitch Party Judging. If you recall, we've always said, you can't make this a competition. And I think we've all settled on this idea. It's a party. We want to talk about what's good, what's bad, what we liked, what we didn't like. About the pitches, we had 4 really strong pitches this last really month. There's been 4 weeks prior. And we're going to talk about them today. At the end, our judges are going to tip their hat to one of those. And the plan now for the next quarter, so that would be July, August, September, that would be at the end of September when we'll repeat this. Submit your business plans to pitchparty@medtechcrossroads.org. Help us get the word out there. It's a little surprising that we didn't get more. It's free money, 10-minute pitch. We would love to have more for September, and we'll do it again. Looking forward to the end of September. All PowerPoints need to have problem statement, vision, value proposition, team, milestones, business model, competitors, and the ask. What are you asking for? Or the functionally equivalent areas. So, but today we have the 4 from this past month. Our judges, as usual, Andy Rader from Evergreen M&A Partners, Dr. Nikki Kennedy, a vascular surgeon, founder of Arbor Hive, and Stacy Frankovich, program manager from MedHealth. Jim Metzger is, due to unfortunate circumstances, not able to join us for this pitch party, but we press on. Jim is the president of Keystone Solutions Group out of West Michigan, a great turnkey developer and design house. But I want to introduce briefly each of our three judges today. First of all, Andy is with us. Andy Rader, managing partner of Evergreen M&A Partners. See if we can get Andy to start his video and audio there. There he is. Sorry.
Here I am.
Didn't prep you.
Hey, Gene.
Good to see you, Andy.
Nice to see you too.
As always, we want you to just take a moment and tell us about Evergreen M&A Partners and what you do. I love your model.
Oh, you bet. Thanks, Gene. It's kind of a strange model. I'm one of the partners at EMA. I helped co-found the firm 20 years ago, based in Denver. We have an office here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we help small companies, usually in life sciences, often in MedTech, when they approach an inflection point, we help them explore their strategic options and then execute on one or more of the pathways. Those pathways are usually fundraising, collaborations, partnerships, licensing, or outright acquisition. And the counterparty is usually either a private equity / VC group or a large or much larger, in many cases, strategic entity.
And it's just, I often find that people will not think about those things midstream. They want to think about it from a pure slate. And so what you guys do is so incredibly valuable in the marketplace. We are glad to have you back judging today, Andy.
Thanks. Good to be here.
And next up, we've got Dr. Nikki Kennedy. She's the founder of Arbor Hive and a vascular surgeon. Nikki, how are you doing today?
Hi, Gene. How you doing?
Good to see you. I'm well.
Good.
Tell us a little bit about Arbor Hive. You are a master of many domains, and I always wonder how you've done them all. But one of your initiatives, getting doctors to think about innovation.
That is the idea. So as I've said before, and thank you guys so much for all the support you guys have thrown towards us. Arbor Hive is a nonprofit innovation network where we try to connect people with clinical expertise to people in the life science and healthcare development industry. We have a lot of physicians. We are actually trying to add some nursing staff into this as well. We have good connections with a lot of the local universities and health systems. And we are interested in trying to get our clinicians in touch with early stage med tech development so that they can have a little guidance as to what the industry or what the market really is looking for and what really is going to help doctors and patients ultimately. So come see us at arborhive.com. If you want to get involved, or if you're looking for a little customer discovery, we'll see what we can do.
That's great. It's so needed because there's oftentimes physicians say, oh, I've got these great ideas. I don't know where to go and I don't know who to trust. And so it's good that you guys are banding together and sort of saying, okay, let's talk about it in our discipline and then develop some best practices as to how we can get these ideas out there. So really hats off to you. Thanks for being here, Nikki. Stacy Frankovich is the program manager at MedHealth. You've already heard about a program that we are running the next, not the next two, but after the next episode, 2 episodes put together in conjunction with MedHealth. MedHealth is doing all sorts of cool stuff, and we just had some announcements from you guys last week, I think it was. Stacy, tell us a bit more about MedHealth.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Gene. It's always a pleasure to partner with you and Into Being. So MedHealth is really a cross-border collaboration. We're a program that helps to connect, convene, and educate innovators on the vast resources that exist all over the region. We really act as an ecosystem facilitator, and we help the innovator find the right resource at the right time. We work very closely with all of our partners across the state and in Windsor to ensure just a really robust network of innovators and services that can help them with their commercialization plan. And I'm going to do a quick plug because we are always trying to make connections. That's what we're all about. We're actually hosting a MedHealth matchmaking mixer, save the date, October 21st. We've had participants from 9 different countries all over the United States, everyone from researchers to innovators to funders to health systems and to private industry partners such as Into Being. So I'll be on the show, I'm sure, plugging this as the months go on, but we're thrilled to be here and love the pitch party. Thanks, Gene.
Thanks for being here, Stacy. Yeah, I love what MedHealth is doing. And I think one of the really unique things is you've been able to bring together not only small startups, but also many health systems into the fold. So people have ways to talk to them as well as insurers. So really cool stuff. Well, thank you three for being here today. We're looking forward to this 4 strong pitches this week that will, or this month that we'll be talking about. I think before we get to the individual ones and remind everybody what they were, any overarching impressions or anything that came back to you? Of course, maybe it was a month ago, we talked about the things that you all as our judges like or don't like in general, but maybe before we dive into the specifics, did you have any overarching impressions that kind of hit you this time as we came to these 4?
I'll throw in, I thought, and you sort of alluded to it a second ago, I thought all 4 were really strong. Really good ideas, and the presentations themselves I thought were really, really solid. I had one complaint. I did notice that 2 of them were from Notre Dame, but outside of that,
We got to get those
they're
Michigan
solid.
folks out here. We're going multi-state here. We're going
know.
nationwide,
I
and
know.
come on, Michigan, let's represent. You know, you
Yeah,
got the football there at least in the background, so I
yeah.
appreciate
I don't know if I approve. That's all I'm saying.
And Andy, do you require that they come from U of M? I mean, is that also?
No, they don't have to come from U of M, but I mean Notre Dame.
It's better than.
No, I'm just kidding.
We
Better than.
have some good rivalries in the office too. Purdue, it happens to be very strongly represented, and like literally the color that one of the walls got painted became a point of contention for our staff. So I think we made it through though. It was a good thing. It was a good thing.
But no, I thought they were really strong pitches this month. That was my thought.
Yeah,
Good
very
stuff.
different types of companies as well.
Yeah, very different stuff, all the way from very physical products to imaging to software, right? So all across the spectrum. Good stuff.
And Jean, and I'll just jump in and say the problems that are being solved, wow. I mean, let's look at these big overarching problems that are being solved. Really, really, really good stuff with these pitches and the problems they're tackling.
Yeah, that's a great point, Stacy. I should say former engineer, right? I only play one on TV now. I used to be a real engineer. Now I run businesses and do media apparently. But I remember thinking, I remember thinking one time, like, maybe I was just getting tired. I was like, wow, are there really any good solutions left? Are there really any interesting problems left? There was this point, I think it was in my early 30s, where I kind of went, I think we're just going to solve them all, and it's all going to get, it's like we're working through it all. And no, I mean, some of the stuff that we're seeing, the problems and also the solutions being offered, probably more interesting than ever, which is cool. That's really neat. Well, let's remind everybody what we're looking at this week. Oh, well, we got our judges back up there. That's always good to look at. I like that. The first one, Hedgehog Health, presented by Parker Lynch. Telehealth solution there. They say the solution, parent coaching. We'll come back through each one of these. I'm going to show you all of them up front. And then next up, John Sexton from Life Drive, motivated by his relatives' battle with ALS, this motorized wheelchair interface. Inherit, Amanda Cook, very interesting model that we'll talk about here, but precision support through the EHR and systems like that. Very interesting. And then Nearwave, Roy Stillwell, this ways to look inside as opposed to traditional mammography, non-invasive low power laser light. Nearwave was going to be with us at our last pitch party, had a very dramatic family emergency. We're glad to say that has been resolved, but given the circumstances of that, we chose not to penalize Nearwave. So when the last email went around, it had the link to this. So hopefully everyone got a chance to see that as well. So let's go back to the beginning and talk about our friends at Hedgehog Health. I'd love to go around the room and get your thoughts on this. Let's start with the sort of the challenges. What maybe left you with a question on Hedgehog Health?
So I had two things that came to mind. Again, I thought that all of the presenters were very strong. I think we all were pretty impressed by everything. But uh, Parker brought up two things that left me with some questions. The first is, does Hedgehog plan to provide its own counselors and resources, or are they just partnering with other groups? Because that was not really made clear to me. And the other thing was he kept talking about how this parent coaching is covered by insurance. And it's not a field of coding that I look at a whole lot, but I do know that different payer plans have different coverage levels. So I'm wondering if this is a CMS CPT code, is this falling under Medicaid, as we're talking about children here? Are we talking about individual payer groups? Because I would think that would be pretty variable, and it's a little tough to make a blanket statement saying, oh, your insurance will cover it. So those are the two things that kind of left me hanging with questions with this. I'm not sure what the other judges thought.
Good question. So to reframe those there, so you've got, are they providing the counselors? Are they leveraging others? And you went through the whole thing and didn't hear anything about CPT codes or how this is going to get paid for.
I
The insurance coverage, but that's a huge question for most people. And I don't know, without some detail on that, how comfortable I'd be with that statement.
Yeah, those are great questions. Others thoughts on those or
I had
or
that
other?
question. I had that question, Dr. Kennedy, as well about the payer side, because many families do utilize Medicaid to support the resources that are needed for their children. But I'll come back to one thing. I was a little unclear about, so there's a huge gap area from diagnosis to when resources can be attained. And so I wanted to make sure that I understood that this was being used as a bridge. So these ABA certified therapists would be working with and training the parents on how to start ABA therapy as a bridge to those waiting lists that they're on, that could be up to 2 years long. I just wasn't clear if this was a solution that took them all the way through, or if it was just a bridge solution. So some clarity on that.
Yeah, and I would generalize Stacy's point. I would have been interested in seeing more about the app itself. And this goes to Nikki's point as well. Understanding exactly what they're doing. I love the idea of engaging the parents, because I think that, at that diagnosis, it's a moment when a parent probably feels worried and a bit out of control. And the idea of having a tool for them is really compelling. But I would have been interested in the pitch part in the deck in seeing more of what the tool actually is, what resources are available, what the support actually is, what happens for the parent.
And that's an interesting question there. So did you feel like you walked away without, it's an app, but maybe all the things that it does aren't quite obvious? Because again, sometimes people will sort of say, well, I don't want to show too much of the tech. This is more of a business pitch. But am I hearing in your comment, Andy, that you couldn't really come back and tell us right now all the details that you need to know about what it does? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I love the idea of being attached to presumably one board certified behavioral analyst that, presumably stays with you and your family during the transition period, as Stacy mentioned, or maybe beyond that, I'm not sure. But I would have been interested in knowing what they're bringing to the parents in terms of tools and resource access and structure.
Those are great comments. I'm sure that'll be very useful to the team. And of course, this is what's different about the pitch party than a pitch competition, right? Because if this were a pitch competition, we'd have opportunity to ask these questions of the teams, and then we sort of judge it on the merits of what they came back. And the value here is really the commentary of saying, you know what, in that first pass through in 10 minutes, this didn't really come out, and other people are going to want to know that in future pitches. So hopefully for each of the teams, these kinds of critiques can help you to improve, when you realize that various people are saying kind of the same echo is coming back. It's good advice. So appreciate that. Let's go to the positive side for Hedgehog Health. What did you guys like about this one?
I think it's hitting a space that is really underserved in a population that's vulnerable. And I'm not saying necessarily that the children are the vulnerable ones. And I think Andy's right. It's the parents who are often feeling pretty vulnerable at this point in time. And I think that focus is lost frequently in our society, and especially as all behavioral therapy seems to be under in general. Sorry. Little lap buddy malfunction right there. But no, otherwise, I think that I really applaud them for trying to tackle this huge field that really I haven't seen anyone else try to get into this. It's a little bit of a white space, I think.
So we're in a space where, okay, we have identified something that's underserved. So maybe we're not saying quite as much as we could about what the solution is, but we've found some blank space around us. That's good.
I totally agree. And if you think about it, especially at that age when a child's likely to be diagnosed with autism, it strikes me that it's really the parent who's going to do most of the guiding. Even if they get hooked into support, they still need to have some context for how to make decisions within the new environment they found themselves. And the idea that they have a tool that they can rely on from the start of that for some amount of time, some presumably fairly long amount of time, is pretty compelling, I think.
Those are good comments. Yeah. So
And I agree with everything that was just said.
we found a space that's compelling. We've found a basic idea that would be useful to have, because people find themselves in a position where they don't know where to go, what to do. So anybody who can say, here, let's go in this direction is useful. Questions around, okay, exactly how are we doing that? Questions around, is this long-term, short-term? Is it a bridge? Who's going to pay for it? And as we've always said, right, and anytime, let's get those CPT codes out there. Let's know how this would fit into something existing. Because finding new CPT codes and getting those approved, that's a big bite off for a startup. Great, good comments. Well, I think we're right on schedule. Let's go on to the next one. Life Drive, the wheelchair solution here, the interface solution. Let's start on the recommendations side. What didn't strike you so good on this one that you wished you'd seen or had questions about?
So when I took a look, I got to tell you, I thought it was a very strong pitch overall. I'm going to throw my insurance question back out there then. I think they didn't make any broad claims, but there was one slide where they said that they're planning on insurance covering, I think it was 50%. And again, not all ALS patients, I think, would fall into Medicare. So then you're looking at commercial payers or Medicaid, and I'm not really sure how the reimbursement would change for that. And I'm also not sure if this is something that could be retrofitted onto an existing device, where if they already owned something that they could just have it modified, or if they'd have to buy a whole new unit.
Yeah, I'd echo both of those. Totally agree with those. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more about the application itself, how it actually works, maybe some even sort of mechanical schematics for that matter, just to give some sense of depth to the actual manifestation. And then I agree, and I think even at a 50% reimbursement, it would have been good if John could have addressed the idea of where the other $3,000 come from, whether that's a normal expenditure, an acceptable expenditure for some portion of this user population, because $3,000 is obviously a lot of money. And again, in an environment where a family's probably undergoing additional financial stress already. So that would have been, for me, that would have been helpful.
We're covering part of it here, but not the other part of it. Yeah,
right.
These things are not cheap. This is good. Yeah. What else did we notice about this one that we might have counsel on?
So Jean, I the one thing that I had written down too was, is this an add-on to existing? So I think they really, because that came up, I think, by Dr. Kennedy as well, or even Andy as well. But I think that we have to understand how it integrates into existing wheelchairs. And I come back to more of the use and the specific use, and is it adaptable as the patient seems to go further into the illness? Is it applicable as their needs change?
Yeah, and
So
I
yeah,
generalized that one too. I agree. Somehow scaling it with sort of acuity would have been informative at least. And this sounds strange, but a demonstration, a short demonstration video, or some measurement of how effective it actually is for a patient in a given area of the disease, I think would have been helpful too. A sense for I don't even know how you do that exactly, but it seems clear, it's intuitively appealing or obvious that it's enabling, but sort of what does that actually mean? I mean, how long can it be used, and what does it actually enable?
yeah, those are good. Those are good comments. In fact, from the perspective of not only understanding it to be able to judge it, right? Because if it's a standalone wheelchair versus an add-on versus how do you add it on versus which ones can you add it to, that affects not only the market and cost and profit question, but it also affects the regulatory question, right? Because FDA makes it very challenging to put devices together. They ask a lot of, there are legitimate technical questions about safety and efficacy, and so to know those things, that does matter. So I think it's an important point you guys are bringing up, to know
And
more about.
Gene, I would even go a little bit further when he mentioned that the patient would talk with their physician to get the referral for this product. In order for this to be reimbursed, there's going to have to be criteria that's met. And I wonder if they have thought ahead about what the doctor would need to see or need to document in order to qualify them for this type of add-on or this type of technology, and if they have identified that yet.
That's great, because it's not just a question of what is it and how would it be paid for, but a question of, okay, within all that, how would you qualify for it? Those are great comments. Well, what do we like about this one? What do we like about Life Drive? Obviously, the situation and the plight of anyone suffering from something like ALS is a no-brainer there. My own grandmother passed from that, so I'm well resonant with that. From a pitch perspective, what do we like here?
I love that they are working to address keeping the patient as mobile and as independent as possible, because ALS is such a debilitating and tragic disease, and to be able to maintain your sense of self and your sense of ability to be independent, I think is, just so important to the overall health and well-being of the patient. So love that they're addressing that. Love their personal story and how they were connected. It made a lot of sense, and it really kind of pulls you into the product.
Yeah, I love John's passion for it. And, I don't want to say this is an easy one to be passionate about if you're him, because that undersells it. But to generalize that idea, I mean, having the founder be, genuinely excited and interested, and this is generalizing away from this one, but having that passion show through in a presentation matters. And we don't talk about that very much, or we as a group haven't talked about it much, but to me, that makes a big difference. And in this one, obviously, it came through very, very strongly for me, and that mattered.
Yeah, I would completely echo that. At the health systems I've been a part of for many years, they always start whatever meeting we're having with what they call a patient story. That's the standard. And they try to find a patient story to really engage the audience so that we understand why the next half hour, hour-long discussion matters. And I think that John did just an absolutely excellent job of that. And that is not something that we always see with pitches. Not that, founders and CEOs aren't passionate about it, but to really see his story about how he worked with I think it was his dad, and they came up with this idea together. And I mean, that really shows you how much this means to him and how much thought he's put into it. And that, as Andy just said, really counts.
I'll throw one more little one in too, and this sounds strange, and it's a very specific example, but I love the fact that he put in there how he was going to use the pitch party money. We often see uses of funds, but I'm in lots and lots of pitches where, with clients or people talking to me directly, where they have a uses of funds, but they don't really boil it all the way down to if if I were to get this money from you or from the people we're talking to, it would allow me to do this specific thing. And that specificity makes a difference to me too.
That is, it's a level of specificity in some other areas we're asking for, and in this case, there's a definite hit there. Like, okay, yeah, I'm going to use it for this purpose. That's great, good stuff. Well, let's move on to the next one. Good comments, all. We're going to go to inherit, and we'll start with the observations or things that you felt were missing or not clear or didn't like. What are your thoughts there?
So I'll jump in on this one because I was really unclear as to the B to B to C model. I wasn't quite sure if they were selling, if the approach was to sell to an insurance provider who would then sell, especially the employee piece where she talked about the employer and the employee. So if the insurance provider is selling to the employer and then the employer is asking their employees to utilize this, I think we have to drill into that B to B to C a little bit more and be a little bit more explanatory about what that is.
I would agree with Stacy. I mean, it struck me the same way when I heard that during the pitch. And as I was thinking about it, my initial thought was they need to sell to a health system or a cancer center or some other rare disease university setting and try to identify these factors as a part of what they offer to the patients. But yeah, using words like employer, employee, I'm not quite sure what their market is. It sounds like they have good traction within some big health partners from the end of the pitch, but that part was a little fuzzy for me as well.
And it ties in with one of the things that struck me, those comments too. I'm kind of curious about what the data actually is, because it wasn't clear to me if it was sort of just familial data, in which case, that can be spotty and misleading and difficult to create a complete tapestry. But it sounds like whatever patient the user inputs turns into a set of tests and more definitive analysis. But I wondered what triggered it and how reliable, consistent, predictable the collection of that data is. Because obviously that ends up driving the whole analytical sort of system. So
that's a great point, Andy. They also actually said how they integrate into electronic health records, but having worked extensively with one of the big ones in the world, they already do the pedigree piece of it if you put in all the correct information. And I'm sure that if they're not already, they're linking a lot of these recommended tests and things like that within the own EHR that they have. So if this is the opportunity for family members who are not on the same electronic health record to all pool their resources, should they be willing, that's helpful, but I'm not really sure how it goes between EHRs easily. That's usually a very, very challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see if there's if they've pulled any data together to show that this type of product would have a reduction factor. I mean, would it really, are they able to prove and document that by utilizing this, you are lowering incidences of cancer?
No, as Stacy, that's a great point. They talked about how you can make money off of the test that they're recommending, but I didn't hear anything about clinical outcomes. Maybe it's just too early in their inception to really track that. But I know it's a business pitch and you do want to look at the dollar signs, but ultimately we are also talking about trying to, improve patient health. So I think.
Well, I hate to say it, but that's how you get payers and employers to actually encourage their populations to use it, right? Because it decreases total lifetime costs.
Yeah.
So what we're hearing here as commentary is that in a simplistic way, if we can make an impact, somebody ought to be willing to pay for it. What we're having a hard time getting down to the bottom of is where's the data to show that the impact is being made, and then exactly who is paying for it, how, and will they be compelled by that data? It sounds like that loop hasn't, we're not seeing that loop. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Yeah. And that goes into the adoption curve, right? I mean, back to who's gonna recommend it, because one reason there's so little tracking of it right now is because it just doesn't occur to the vast majority of the population to figure it out. So it would be extremely expensive to get them to understand the importance of it, unless your payer or your employer, or, there's a groundswell that says, hey, you really ought to know, this stuff about you and your family so that you can make better decisions, or have, better idea what's coming.
Yeah. Okay. Good comments.
Well-
Well, what do we like about? We should go into the likes here. Make sure we leave time for the fourth one. What do we like about Inherit?
I liked it that it was multi-cancer, because it's true that generally, if cancer hits a family, there's some work done then within the family, so that everyone becomes aware of what part of it might be, driven by genetics. But I like the fact that this was pan cancer. The idea that you're trying to collect presumably a family collection of information that everybody could use about a bunch of potential cancers.
And if this is adopted by many large cancer institutes or universities, it has amazing research potential. I mean, really revolutionary. I think the hardest part is just pooling all of that data accurately from so many different sources. And if they can tackle that problem, man, I mean, that's just a huge blow for freedom right there.
And a cancer diagnosis can be a huge blow to a family, and to be able to have that data and share that data, amongst your family members, and then they can work with their primary provider to decide what the best next approach is for them. Because not only do we worry about our family member who's now going to be battling cancer, but we always worry about, the implication that it could potentially have on us or our children or loved ones as well. So really good job in trying to pull that together a little bit.
So if we had more of a sense of, yeah, this data is making a difference, and we have access to it, and we can accurately bring it together, and then sort out the who's paying for it and how, and whether that lines up with the data, the need is there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great comments. Oh, as always, this is intended as what was the first impression? How did you respond to it? What more would you want to know? And I think we've heard that here today. Let's go on to our fourth company, Nearwave Imaging, looking at a different way of imaging tissue. What was challenging about this one? What do we want to communicate to Mr. Stillwell?
So if I can put my radiologist hat on, even though it's been many years since my radiology days, infrared imaging for breast tumors has been around for a long time, and it hasn't really caught on. And I'm not sure necessarily if it's because they haven't had the right technology to do that. But I remember even back in the early 2000s, when I actually was a radiology resident for a year, this was one of the topics that was discussed. It was more of like a camera of sorts rather than a handheld device. So I think that there's absolute utility for it. But the questions I have would be, he really didn't talk about inter-user reliability. So is this for a primary care physician to use, or is this for a radiologist trained in breast imaging to use? Also, he talks about his data quite a bit, but then it didn't seem like he's actually done a formal pilot. And it sounds like they might even still be working on a final prototype for use. And the last thing I noticed was the data storage. Is this being integrated within EHR? Is a radiologist actually expected to read this? Are there legal complications with that? So even though I love the technology, it raised a lot of logistics questions that I didn't really find the answers to in that 10 minutes.
So this is something where this has been, the general domain has been looked at before. And if that had been addressed more directly, you would have had sort of that competitive analysis. But right now you sort of have to look at it like, okay, do you know what the landscape is there? Yeah,
and I was
good
unclear
comments.
about the setting, Gene. Just like Dr. Kennedy said, I was a little unclear about the setting that this would be used in. Is it, and I would fear that it would be replacing mammogram or replacing other diagnostics. And I don't think that's the role they want to play, but I think a little clarification on that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. Some hardcore data would have been really helpful. At EMA, we've actually done a couple of heat-driven breast cancer diagnostic projects over the years. And it's an area that I think, and Nikki, you would be able to comment on this better than I probably, but it's an area where people have thought for a long time there's tons of promise and there should be something. And I know we're supposed to be doing sort of the negatives now, less than the positives. In this case, though, I like the idea that it seemed to have a laser driver, a light driver in it. And here's the negative side. I would have liked to have known more about how it actually works and then how that drives to some data, some repeatability data, some predictive data. And they mentioned in passing sort of there was 1 centimeter resolution. I know it's a really short amount of time for them to cover a lot of ground, but talking about why that would be relevant, why that's precise enough to matter. And again, this then ties back to the primary care, user sort of question. Who can actually use it? If you're going to grab it 1 centimeter resolution on an image, have they actually put it in hands and shown that docs can actually make a good, not a diagnostic decision, of course, but a good, guiding decision based on what they see.
And so this one comes back also to and it's a challenging gap, but nevertheless, even in a business pitch, we've got to be convinced that we know how it's working. There's got to be enough there to let us know. Yeah, we think we know how this is working.
Yeah, it wasn't clear to me if he had an actual pilot that he's done or if he had a final design. I thought at first that he did, but as he talked a little bit more, I started to question that. So I'm not really sure who the intended user is, and if this is only for monitoring patients on chemo, see if things shrink, or if this is an early detection tool potentially. A lot of questions about the target segment here.
Good comments. Well, what did we like about Nearwave?
Oh, it's an amazing technology. It's had promise for many, many years, and people have not really found a good streamlined way to get it into offices in front of patients. So if they can address these questions successfully, I think this is going to revolutionize some of the imaging world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And dense breasts are a big deal. They're a big deal in the US, but they're huge in China. I think it's 50 to 60% of women have dense breast tissue. And so, this is a worldwide, the imaging side of this, therefore the diagnostic side of this is a worldwide problem. And maybe even more so out of the US, where a handheld device that could actually, do a preliminary screen, and I know we're not supposed to talk about that, but might be incredibly useful and powerful. So, and all the big imaging guys all are interested in this. They're interested in the area and looking for solutions. So I think there'd be a lot of interest among the big players in looking at it if the data is there and the user set's right.
And this one really struck a chord. My little sister recently has completed her cancer treatments for breast cancer. And she had a terrible time. She was pulled off chemo early because she couldn't tolerate it. The tests that they had to continue to do, the amount of radiation they did because they just weren't sure, was really hard on her. So from a personal perspective, if this can revolutionize the hardship she went through, or any cancer fighter can go through, I'm all in. I was really impressed with the non-invasive potential capabilities here.
So this may be a place to use an analogy that I wasn't actually really around for. This is a place where maybe Betamax has been around for a while, but we're still waiting for VHS to come out. There's someone invented the video cassette, but we're trying to really make it work in the main market. Wow, I just dated myself there, but
you did date yourself.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wonderful. These are wonderful comments. We've gotten down to the point where we've got a few minutes left here, and of course, you know what that means. Of these four, again, just to remind everybody, Hedgehog Health, Life Drive, and Inherit, and Nearwave Imaging. Even though it's not a competition, we've got the hardest work ahead of us in these coming minutes. We have to tip hats, the three of you, into being stays out of it, because we're sending the prize to whoever you pick. And the hat tip doesn't have to be based on any particular, this one is better than the others. It's not based on, we're pretty sure this one's going to succeed and the others aren't. It really is just something that stood out to you. Why do you want to tip your hat to this one, whichever it is? I've got 4 pitches and 3 judges today. So we'll see how this works. We're not going to have an absolute stalemate. You couldn't each give them one. So if there's consensus, that'll be great. If there's not, we may have to do a few rounds. But let's go around the table and see who you want to tip your hat to. And there was a fight for who is going to be last. I think Andy nominated Nikki to be last. I think that was
The tiebreaker.
the tiebreaker.
Dirty work.
Always doing the dirty
Down the
work.
bottom end of the curve, but somebody's going to do it.
Well, Nikki, you have the most education of any of us, so I think you really have to play.
Can't argue with that. Okay. Let's see where the tips come down. Andy, you willing to kick us off?
Sure, I'll go first. For me, it's Nearwave. It's an area that has a huge unmet need. The current modalities are not effective, and I don't know that this will step up and be the new modality, but anything that helps would be great. And this is an area that I personally have thought for a long time would probably end up emerging eventually. And so if he's got a light driver inside of his light reader in his prototype device, I think it may actually bridge some of the gaps that have existed in the past. So my nod is for Nearwave.
Okay, one nod for Nearwave. Well, let's see who's going to go next.
Well, I'll go ahead and go because we said that we were going to let Nikki go last. So I'll go ahead.
Nikki on the spot.
And hopefully this doesn't come as any big surprise because I did feel that Nearwave was kind of near and dear to my heart. So that's what I had chosen as well.
Wow. Okay. Stacy for Nearwave. Nikki, what are your thoughts?
So I was very impressed by all of them. I was very impressed by Nearwave, but I got to tell you, I'm going to tip my hat to LifeDrive. Because again, with Nearwave, I just really felt that it left me with a lot of questions as to how far they are along with the development process. LifeDrive had great story, lots of market discovery from what they were saying. They have a very concrete thing. They've got a specific plan that they were looking to do for their next steps with the prize money. And it just seemed like a really logical, well-communicated package. So like Nearwave, but I gotta say LifeDrive put on a really, really great show. So.
Great comments all. So it looks like Nearwave is our prize winner. The check will be sent to Nearwave. But I think it is interesting to note, and this is why we call this a pitch party, not a pitch competition, because a lot of the reason that Nearwave gets the nod today, there were a lot of things that you guys were saying, hey, hold on, don't know if this is really there, don't know if this is going for, and if it really has to do a lot with the strength of the need and the fact that we believe this technology will eventually emerge. But take note of the deficiencies, because that doesn't mean that this is the company that will succeed. It's really just a nod towards the need in the space. And Nikki, to put words in your mouth, it sounds like on LifeDrive a lot about the passion there.
And also a huge need.
Huge need,
yeah.
Yep. Great. Well, that is our news for the day. With 5 minutes left to go on the show, Nearwave is your winner with a nod to LifeDrive, but great pitches all, as we started out by saying. Wonderful stuff. Hope that you'll go back, if you're with one of those companies, you'll go back and listen to the commentary when it posts on the website in the next few days. Because these are the kinds of things that you're going to get asked if you're doing other pitches as well. Hopefully it can help you to increase the strength of your pitch. And we wish all success to all 4 of these companies as they go forward, because you guys did a great job and are all working on wonderful things. So we really appreciate your being part of the pitch party. Next pitch party will be ramping up as we move towards September. So I want to thank all of our judges, Stacy, Nikki, and Andy, as well as Jim, who couldn't be with us today, for your participation. You're what makes this pitch party work. So we thank you always for your wonderful, wonderful insights and your time taken to research each of these pitches before the show.
Thanks.
Well, with that, I'm going to give a few minutes here to see if anyone has a question or a comment, not on the pitch party per se. As always, we don't have a Q&A on the pitch party. But if there's something you want to announce that's happening in the community, we'd love to hear from you. Anything that your company or your effort is doing, we'd love to know about it. Or a question about anything that you've heard on the show at any point in the past, we're happy to address it. We'll leave the channel open for probably another 30 seconds, looking for raised hands or anything in the Q&A before we head out. Yes, I agree with Stacy's comment. Very impressive pitches. You should all be proud. Totally agree. Our friend Sandra Cochran has a comment or a question or an announcement or something, but we always love hearing from Sandra. Sandra, you're live.
Hi, thank you. I would just like to announce we've got a nice event coming up next week. If anyone is interested, it's a virtual event online. It is called Turn the Tables. We will have 3 panelists from various Series A round venture funds presenting their funds. So anyone who's looking to raise money and wants to understand the investment process, we'll have Joe Lampin from Wakestream Ventures, Jeff Berry from Plymouth Growth Partners, and Jeff Ponders from Invest Detroit. That event will take place on Tuesday, June 29th from 11 to 12. And I can drop the link to registration in the chat box in just a moment.
Sandra, that's great. Thank you for announcing that. I'm also just going to pop the webpage up there for that, which I just managed to find while you were mentioning that. So WMed Innovation, of course, where Sandra leads the team out there in West Michigan in Kalamazoo. There it is on Tuesday, June 29th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And there's sign up there. So if you do a web search for that, a Google search, or you go to med.wmich.edu. Oh, that's a messy thing, but you'll drop the thing in the chat there, right, Sandra?
It's in the chat right now.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And let's see if we got any more announcements. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, but thank you for that, Sandra. And once again, thank you to all of our judges and all of our pitches. You guys make the world turn for this pitch party. We're so glad to have everybody here today. And we will follow up with Nearwave to get them their prize money. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for being part of MedTech Crossroads. We'll see you next week with Dr. Phil Levy on July 2nd. Talk soon. Bye-bye.